So I think the ziggurat comes out of some deep-seated something wrong with me.
An infant's cot implying some kind of situation of pain or abuse.
Balloons are like the simplest way to package air. I mean, it's also a piece of rubbish, you know.
Explore the work of Britain's most celebrated contemporary artists. The Eye, Fridays at 8:30 on Artsworld.
Later tonight, at 1:45, see Patrice Bart's choreography of Tchaikovsky's ballet The Nutcracker. But now, in a documentary profile, Artsworld Icons celebrates talented animator Chuck Jones, who brought to life some of animation's most beloved cartoon characters.
Hunting we will go, hunting we will go. I-O the mill-wheel, hunting we will go. I'm a wet-hot sportsman after wild game. Huh? Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting wabbits.
Wabbit season! Duck season!
Beep, beep. Hello, young lover.
Let's get this picture started.
There's a kind of a evilness in Daffy that is always, coming to the surface.
The cotton gin was invented by Eli Whitney. You're absolutely correct. And let me remind you again, folks, that you're listening to Truth or...
I think I just appreciated just the bombast, the absolute zany, chaotic, approach that Daffy had to the world.
Pepe's one of my favorites just simply because he is relentless. He's what you want your agent to be.
Oh, hello there. I am so glad you could come. You have never looked more ravishing. Do you mind waiting just 1 minute, golden girl, while I slip into something more comfortable?
You relate to them. They're flawed, they've got impediments, but they're still outrageous.
Wabbit season! Duck season! Wabbit season! I say it's duck season, and I say fire!
The amazing thing about Chuck Jones's cartoons are not merely the big gags. For me, they're the little moments, the little hesitations, the little silence when the character is floating in the air just before he realizes there's nothing underneath and then drops.
Probably the greatest influence I've ever had personally is with the work of Chuck Jones. And I realized through the years that all of my favorite Warner Brothers cartoons were directed by this guy, Charles M. Jones. As I became a student of animation, it was his timing. It was his sense of character, their relationships. That's where the humor came from. It wasn't just bang gags, it was the characters, the comic timing, and the sense of personality.
I was born in 1912, and Gertie the Dinosaur was born in 1914. That's where it all started. The amazing thing then was that people were so surprised that anything could move. It was so magic. Silent Pictures was a great school. I didn't know I was being schooled, but I learned all these things when we were living on Sunset Boulevard, which is 2 blocks away from the Chaplin studio, and that's where we'd watch him. Well, if it was good enough for Chaplin or Keaton, it was good enough for me, that was sure. I didn't even think that I was copying him. You're crazy if you don't learn from others. Yow! The reason I got into drawing was because I had the right parents. My mother had felt that children could do no wrong. She would never criticize a child's drawing, and that was probably the most important thing of all.
And then we had a father who was always going into new businesses, and he was always failing in them, and he always ended up with a whole bunch of letterheads that nobody could ever use except us to draw on the back of.
He said, you never know when you're going to get a drawing worth keeping.
Chuck's talent was beginning to show at a very early age. He was really quite a good draftsman as a youngster.
We did move around a lot, and the way we moved was that my father would look around till he rented the house that had books in it.
Not just books, but good books. Full sets of Mark Twain, full sets of Dickens, Baudelaire, O. Henry, de Maupassant. And we had read every single one of those, all of us, and we ended up with a pretty good knowledge of world literature.
8 and 8 is 16.
I hated school.
16 and 16 is 32.
I was miles ahead, as it turned out, of most kids of my age. And these people were wallowing around in these platitudes.
4 and 4 is 8.
Well, Mr. Phillips, daydreaming again?
The great good luck that I had was that my father realized that I was so bloody unhappy in high school that he took me out of high school and put me in Chenard Art Institute.
Chuck graduated from the Chenard Art School, I think it was in 1930. And then he drew portraits for a couple of years when he was at a place called Olvera Street, which was a tourist trap.
I don't know how I ever got the idea that I could draw a portrait that was worth $1, but we did. I discovered that it didn't matter what they looked like, you could make them look pretty in profile, because they'd never seen their own profiles. So by doing that, they'd go away happy and I'd get my $1. Every time you make a caricature, you lose a friend. I didn't know I was going to be an animator. Even when I went to art school, I didn't know that what I was aiming for, because I knew that they made these pictures, but I didn't know how. So rather than being an artist, as the guys from New York called it, I became a cell washer. In those days, the cells were actually made of celluloid, and they cost 7 cents a piece. I remember that clearly.
There were these things called cells, and not only did they use them to make animation, they reused them to save money during the Depression.
It was cheaper to hire somebody for $15 a week to wash cells than it was to go out and buy a whole new set of them.
Having worked his way up literally, and he worked for Iworks, and he worked for all sorts of people in the profession. He worked his way up to animator, and he was now animating for really good directors. Fritz Freleng, Tex Avery, everybody had their own individual styles, and he was learning what to do, what not to do.
The Warner Brothers animation department, which for a long time was Leon Schlesinger Productions, wasn't even officially part of Warner Brothers, did not exist on the Warner Brothers studio lot in Burbank. It was sort of an annex of the original Warner Brothers property on Sunset Boulevard. And the area that was assigned to the animation department was dubbed by its denizens Termite Terrace, apparently not without cause.
It was kind of a ratty old building, it was falling apart. But it was the kind of environment where great things come out of.
When Chuck first started out, his cartoons were, I think, considered aggressively cute. He did a lot of very round, soft Sniffles the Mouse cartoons, and there's a very pronounced Disney influence in those years.
The reason why is plain to
He was kind of doing Disney-type things with a lower budget.
A robin!
But it wasn't that dynamic kind of thing he did later, you know.
It's sure nice and dark, all right. Oh,
Well, I was criticized because they said I was imitating Disney. It seemed to me quite natural to learn how the hell they would do these things like they did and to make them believable. But I didn't know anything else to do but to study the people that had come before me.
Disney had established a fortress of very sincere storytelling, which just by its nature is calling for somebody else to come along and do something with an edge to it or a bite to it.
What it was that caused him to absorb more of the Warner's wackiness over that 4 or 5 year period, that transitional period from his first films to his first great films, I don't know.
I remember reading about Chuck saying that he had directed The Draft Horse during this period. It was a great cartoon. First of all, tour de force animation by Ken Harris of this horse attempting to be drafted to show his patriotism to the army sergeant.
boy, I'm gonna be a soldier. I'm gonna fight the enemy. Bang, 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 bang. I'll annihilate them. I'll wipe them out. That's what I'll do. I'll get them.
The draft horse. It isn't comfortable for a horse to assume those positions.
And it's the first time Chuck realized when he saw it with an audience that he could actually get laughs.
They got me. Mother.
And I think that turned the corner for him. I think he said, hey, I kind of like this. This is kind of fun, seeing an audience actually respond in a very vocal way to my work.
Part of Chuck's coming of age at Warner Brothers as a director was experimenting with the look of the films, the actual design of the films.
Those backgrounds were abstract. And they became believable because of the way the characters move within them. And in that Aristocat, first time I realized, through the good offices of the layout man, how you could show the characters almost losing their mind by what the backgrounds were.
Meadows! 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 Meadows!
And by using that, he could show the degeneration of the character's mind. And it was very effective. You really felt that.
There was one picture that I remember that Chuck did, which really was so different, such a stylized picture. The layout and background men were John McGrew and Gene Fleury.
One of Chuck's early masterpieces was The Dover Boys, where he really learned about clarity of timing and clarity of posing.
I was fortunate enough to have worked on that one.
We used to read The Rover Boys, Tom, Dick, and Larry, and I got so fascinated by the ridiculousness of it. But I noticed that every time in the book, whenever they mention the Rover Boys, they say the Rover Boys from Tom, Dick, and Larry and their arch enemy, Dan Backside.
The former sneak of Roquefort Hall, coward bully Cadden Thief, and arch enemy of the Dover Boys, squanders his misspent life.
Hark, the Dover Boys. Drat them.
And every time they mention this guy in the book, they would say, Dan Backside, coward, bully, cat, and thief, and arch enemy of the Dover Boys, so you wouldn't forget. But it seemed so ridiculous. The more they said it, the funnier it sounded to me. So that's why I put it in. I'm very much at home with villains.
A runabout. I'll steal it! No one will ever know!
You want that feeling of suddenness, and then stop.
And the way that he would make the timing crisp is that he would go from one pose over here to another pose over here with what animators call smear drawings, so that he would take about 3 frames where he would establish one pose here, one pose there, and then smear all the way between both poses at once, and then fold up into the final drawing. It was an unbelievable thing. It was one of the first uses of what people now call limited animation, although I prefer to think of it as stylized animation rather than limited animation, because the animation is still great. It's just pushing a pose for all of its value.
Management didn't know anything about cartoons. They didn't know humor, they didn't know creation. All they wanted to do was make money. Every so often something would sneak through, like the Dover Boys.
When he did Dover Boys, he caught hell from the front office. They didn't want that limited animation, even though it was great.
I got fired a number of times, but they didn't seem to take. I don't know. I didn't know I was fired, so I stick around.
Chuck was a lot of times working with characters who'd been originated by others, and he put his stamp certainly on Bugs Bunny as much as anybody did, but he didn't actually originate him. And that goes for Daffy and Porky and all those guys. But the Roadrunner and the Coyote were entirely Chuck's, as were Pepe Le Pew and some of the later characters. If you think of Bugs and Daffy and Porky as characters who are like actors who work for different directors, you know, depending on who's directing the movie, I mean, you'll see that they actually have different personas in depending on who's directing. But when Chuck is directing, somehow the characters have extra depth.
Chuck directed a picture called Presto Changeo with that rabbit that didn't have a name yet. And in that picture, he didn't even speak. In fact, several of Chuck's pictures, there was no dialogue. I think that was the charming part. And I loved that movie. And they always screened the pictures for us, you know. And we always had to write a critique. I remember saying I really thought that that was a great cartoon, and that rabbit really they should have him in more pictures, which they did eventually, and he evolved into Bugs Bunny, as you probably know.
What's up, Doc? There's a rabbit down there, and I'm trying to catch him.
Tex Avery did A Wild Hare, and that's when the rabbit says, "What's up, Doc?" And that just seemed to seal his fate.
When Tex Avery did Bugs, and did him very beautifully in his own way, he was just crazy, nuts. He was one of the great directors. And what he did was he approached it in quite a different way.
Going up.
What I had to find out was, if I was Bugs Bunny, how would I act? How he resembled me.
Okay, everybody out, main floor.
When Bugs Bunny came along in the 40s, and really developed in the 40s, he was sort of the anti-Mickey Mouse, because he was everything Mickey Mouse wasn't. Irreverent, a wise guy, not middle American at all, but New Yorkese, and he had a pugnacious nature that was perfectly suited, as it turns out, to the times.
Look, Doc, do I go around nailing signs over your house? Do I? There's still such a thing as private property, you know. Did you ever hear of the inalienable right of the sanctity of the home?
Bugs Bunny is not just an insane rabbit. Somebody's always trying to get him, and he's retaliating, and he's getting revenge. I think we can all relate to that. I know, working in Hollywood, I can.
When they want to snuggle tight, well, music hater.
And it was that kind of stubbornness, I think, that sometimes gave us a pretty good idea of what Bugs Bunny was all about. That he wanted to complete the thing that he was trying to do, and there was an impediment. In this case, it was Giovanni Jones.
Uh-oh.
Having been provoked, and then he engages cheerfully into the battle.
Of course, you know, this means war.
And then he says, of course, you realize this means war. And that was such a useful thing. It was, of course, it came from the Marx Brothers. They used it. But I thought, well, at least I'm stealing from a great source. Bugs can play any part.
Bugs Bunny, the super rabbit, the rabbit of tomorrow.
Another thing we have to add to him is the playfulness.
And you're so big and so strong. Why, poor helpless little me was just lost till you...
Think nothing of it, Missy. It was a pleasure, I assure you.
And the idea of Bugs playing the femme always kind of made me laugh.
Oh, how simply dreadful.
And he knows that Elmer is a patsy for girls, so he uses that.
I hurt you with my naughty gun.
Oh, shucks. Well, I
think Chuck's take on Bugs Bunny is he's a winner. Daffy Duck is a loser.
Disney did Donald, and Donald had polite humor, and Daffy was vaudevillian humor. Daffy was basically pie-in-the-face, total slapstick.
The story always with Daffy is to put him in a situation as if Bugs were there, he would be triumphant. But if Daffy's doing it, you know he's going to screw it up.
Seems awfully breezy in here. Cease that rustling. Slight pause whilst I adjust my accoutrements.
He believes that everybody's out to do him in, which is a perfectly legitimate supposition. They are out there to do him in.
He's relentless because he just won't stop.
Yikes! And away!
And there's something of the little kid in that.
Yikes! And away! Yikes! And away! Zoinks! And away! Yikes!
And I understood Daffy because I was Daffy, and I am Daffy. I said I can dream about being Bugs Bunny, but when I wake up, I'm Daffy. And there's no two ways about that.
You know, doing the unexpected is a lot of what makes these cartoons work.
A close-up! This is a close-up! A close-up, you jerk! A close-up!
It's turning the formula inside out, as he does, you know, so completely in Duck Amuck.
That picture is a wonderful example of personality being worked to the nth degree with one character.
Damn breathe before we say, Buster, it may come as a complete surprise to you to find that this is an animated cartoon. And that in animated cartoons they have scenery. And in all the years I... All right, wise guy, where am I?
And it was such a great concept, this unseen animator, you know, basically torturing Daffy Duck.
It was the inappropriate quality of everything that made him pay off so well.
I use that a lot of, conditions in which people find themselves in the proper attitude, but in the wrong place.
Well, where's the rest of me? It isn't as though I haven't lived up to my contract, goodness knows. And goodness knows it isn't as though I haven't kept myself trim, goodness knows. I've done that. That's strange. All of a sudden, I don't quite feel like myself. Oh, I feel all right, and yet Hey! You know better than that! Well?
It really played with the conventions of animated cartoon making.
Who is responsible for this? I demand that you show yourself! Who are you? Huh? Ain't I a stinker?
There's a wonderful series he did with Daffy Duck and Porky Pig. They were kind of parodies of lots of different either TV shows or film genres.
Are you ready, eager young space cadet? I'm all set, your hero ship, sir. Then make way for Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century! Oops. had the silly thing in reverse.
And I think that was one of the first big plays with The Martian.
Got the drop on you with my disintegrating pistol. And brother, when it disintegrates, it disintegrates. Well, what do you know? It's disintegrated.
Happy birthday, you thing from another world, you.
Oh, thank you.
And I wouldn't be surprised if you can get George Lucas to someday admit that the entire costume design for Darth Vader came from The Martian.
Yeah, Lucas admits that. I would have liked to have seen Marvin the Martian as Darth Vader. I'm your father! Luke, use the Force! If not, this Acme discombobulator ray.
There's Duck Dodgers, but I love Rocket Squad, which is so great. It's like a dragnet in space with those two guys.
This is the Milky Way, a nice galaxy. 875 billion trillion people live here. Yes, it's a nice place to live. It's my job to keep it that way. I'm a space cop. My name's Monday. My partner's name is Tuesday. He always follows me. With Wednesday, January 23rd, 10:26 p.m.
It's 10:28.
Like I said, it was 10:28 p.m.
The genre parodies give you a big leg up. You can just worry about the content. The form is kind of set.
Joe, come right over, please. I need help immediately.
Right. My interview with the chief was brief and to the point. He wanted me to find out who the flying saucer bandit was, and then to place him under arrest. I consented.
Because the audience knows the reference points, he can move much faster, and he can just concentrate on being funny, which he does brilliantly.
By the time I was about 6 years old, all we saw were silent pictures and very flamboyant action.
You ain't got a chance. I'm the hero of this picture, and you know what happens to the villain. So what's to know?
I grew up with Douglas Fairbanks. I wanted to be that kind of a dashing hero. And then when I got to Daffy Duck, well, he was not the right person to be that grand.
You look at Pepe Le Pew, this character, and how he just walks through life with such optimism, yet he stinks.
Just to think, radiant flower, you do not have to come with me to the Casbah. We are already here.
Pepe was relatively simple to me because he was one of the few characters I could completely associate with.
Preliminaries.
Because I wasn't a very attractive young man. At least I didn't think I was, which is the same thing.
Smacking love.
So Pepe came quite naturally to me. I mean, he was a person who had no doubt about his own sexuality.
This small coquette, she's think by running away, she can make herself more attractive to me. How right she is.
Chuck loves to talk about being ignored in high school by the girls, partly because he was a lot younger than they were, and Pepe's endless pursuit and self-confidence, which Chuck, of course, did not feel.
Oh, the one in the middle may remain. The rest of you, another day.
Pepe's he's just a horny skunk.
If Pepe ever gets pursued very much, he runs in the other direction.
Madame, control yourself. Your conduct is unseemly. Control yourself. Madame! Why is it that whenever a man is captured by a woman, all he wishes to do is get away?
All the girls like Pepe Le Pew.
Chuck did a series of cartoons with Hubie and Bertie, these two characters that I love.
Hey, boy, come here! Yeah, Hubie, what is it, huh? What is it, what is it? Welcome to our new home. Nice, huh? Yeah, sure.
And one of them is very bright, and the other one is not. And the bright guy sees a way of getting rid of the cat, but the other guy's tickled by it.
Let's see now, This is gonna require strategy. The thing we gotta do is we gotta get that cat out of the house. Now here's what you should do, boy.
I needed a cat who would be bedeviled by these two mice who were trying to get him to move out of the house. That's the whole story. So I invented Claude Cat.
The Simpsons has always been given credit for showing the American dysfunctional family. But you look at those three bears with Junior and Henry and that poor hapless wife. That's the American dysfunctional family, predating The Simpsons by 30 or 40 years.
Once upon a time, in the deep woods, there lived three bears. Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear.
Eat your oatmeal! What'd I do? What'd I do?
Stan was wonderful. When he came to work for me when I needed the baby bear. And he was 18 years old.
I played the junior bear that talked like that. I remember one line. On Father's Day, they drove this father bear crazy.
Presenting a Father's Day poem, Henry.
My Paw by Junior Bear, age 7½.
When my poor little pinafore's all wet with tears, who says,
There, little man, everything is all right. My paw.
But I don't want breakfast in bed. I hate breakfast in bed.
Father's Day, Henry.
On her 6th birthday, when Linda, my daughter, decided she was old enough to prepare my breakfast, she knew what I liked, which is French toast and bacon and stuff. And so she wanted to serve it to me in bed.
It was much like that. It would grump. He'd say, I hate breakfast in bed. Why do I have to have breakfast in bed? And my mother would say, because it's Father's Day, dear. And he would say, all right, I'll have breakfast in bed then.
Breakfast in bed for Paw. I am doing a good thing on Father's Day.
Good old breakfast for good old Dad on good old Father's Day, you know.
The cosmic significance of the Roadrunner chase is something that, you know, is pretty much inescapable. The reason that you're watching the cartoon is because he's never going to catch the Roadrunner. There's no way. He's fated to never do it. The repetition and the variations of changes on the situation are unique, I think, in the annals of filmmaking.
Mike Maltese and I were trying to do something which would be a parody. Why was everybody chasing everybody else?
Meep, meep. Meep, meep. Meep, meep. Meep, 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 meep.
Sometimes I feel very sorry for the coyote. Sometimes I wish he'd catch him. If he caught him, there wouldn't be any more Roadrunner. You wouldn't like that, would you?
Meep, meep.
No.
I mean, a 3-year-old can relate to the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. I mean, you can identify with that hunger, that need to get the meal, you know? And yet you want to be able to run away from the monsters who are chasing you.
The coyote could only be victimized by his own ineptitudes and his trust in the Acme Corporation.
Meep, meep.
Practically every product that the Coyote orders, or that a Warner Brothers character uses, is from the Acme company. The products themselves were anything but the Acme of their manufacture. Usually they backfired completely.
All comedy is based on error, on mistakes. And who was it, Mark Twain said something about stepping on a banana peel. That is very funny if it happens to somebody else, but if it happens to you, it's not funny.
The wonderful thing about animation is that you can choose to do whatever you want to do. You don't have to follow the conventions of real life. So when the Coyote's going to start running, for instance, there's a lot of ways you could have him start to run to build up a head of speed. He could spring into action, like being catapulted almost. His legs can start rotating and building up speed and starting to kick up dust. The feet go first, and then he has to sort of move the rest of his torso to get in sync with the bottom part of his anatomy.
In the Chuck Jones tradition, that happens all the time. People are constantly being flattened and then they pop up into 3 dimensions again. When you see a Chuck Jones character in the beginning of a film, you know that that person or that animal is not going to stay in that shape for 6 minutes. They're going to be going through a lot of different kinds of physical manifestations.
Meep, meep.
And I think it's that kind of respect for gravity, respect for Isaac Newton, that really makes them even funnier.
The idea of looking up and waving, if you had time, you'd do it. Give yourself dignity, at least.
A live-action director sets up a scene, shoots it, and tries to get the right energy, the right rhythm into the scene, into the performances and such, and then in the editing room refines that and may use cutaways of some of the other actors or tighten up some of the spaces between moments of dialogue, and then that's it. Well, the animation director has to do all that beforehand.
In Chuck's cartoons, there's an awareness of the camera that a lot of directors don't have.
Oftentimes in our work, we're so inspired by the camera angles, not in live action, but in Chuck's work. And what amazes me is all those camera angles weren't found by looking around the set. They were drawn. And so often, his camera angles are a major part of the gag.
The impact of the cuts and the choices are not just functional, they're really effective.
It's like what I think a lot of directors do today. We do storyboards. We do our live action movies in cartoon form.
In the old days, they didn't write a script. They would draw the gags and do the dialogue like a cartoon strip that you would see in the funny paper.
If you imagine a Sunday comic strip with 140 sketches, we stuck up anything at random. Just any idea, maybe an expression, anything. And then as they had some relationship with one another, they would be brought together.
Ted Pierce was a story man, and he did lots of stories for Chuck. And then later, Mike Maltese worked with Chuck, and Chuck had a great rapport with Mike.
I bet if you took the same storyboard with all the same gags in it and even the same audio track and gave it to two directors, Chuck being one and someone else being the other, Chuck's would always be funnier. Because he understood what makes a gag work.
I wonder if the public really knows the part that a good director plays in animation. It's not the job of the animator to create the situation and to create the characters and to create the timing. It's the director who does it every step of the way. He does the extreme drawings. He does the points of contact.
An animation director, at least in the classic style of animation directors, would actually draw the key poses, or what are sometimes called extremes, for every shot, every character. Chuck would do that drawing. Maybe not a finished drawing, but he would do a drawing that would capture the attitude, and that's the key word that they all use, of course, attitude, of the character at that moment.
When Chuck directs a cartoon, he does an awful lot of layout pose drawings for the animator.
Meep, meep.
In fact, his pose drawings actually come before the background layouts. He'll kind of establish the space the characters are working in and their attitudes, and then they'll kind of work the background layouts around that, so he can have the freedom to express through the characters the way that he wants. And he will make a lot of drawings, really indicating one character's thought processes all the way through the entire cartoon. Now, this is really what animators use as a roadmap. It doesn't mean that the scene is pre-animated. It means rather that these are the succinct points that the animators need to hit to get this particular expression across. But animators, being great animators like Ken Harris or Ben Washam, can take that and it gives them one boost up. That gives them the clear road that they're traveling, and then they turn it into animation magic.
The approach that Chuck Jones took, which was to storyboard and plan everything out with his layout and give it to the animators to follow to the T, the timing, everything that he had was there, the table was set.
Ho, ha, ha, guard, turn, parry, dodge, spin, ha, thrust.
He approaches his films that way. Everything is planned to the nth degree. And there's a real personal stamp on a film when a director approaches it that way. The individual person of that director is seen through nearly every frame.
Chuck would call all his animators and crew in, and he'd go through it. And he knew which animator could do which the best. And I would stand in the background and listen to the whole story. And then Chuck would bring the whole picture into me. And I'd quickly go through and make rough sketches of every single scene in extreme. Very quick red sketches. I knew where all the action was.
Awfully unsporting of me, I know, but what the hey, I gotta have some fun.
The characters are flat design characters. They're satire, they're fun to look at.
Meep, meep.
So consequently, I thought the background should fit in with that. Be designed element, fun elements. But there's a very fine line between design and rapport with your audience. In other words, you can have a very designed element and lose your audience. So all my design is based on supporting the character in the action that they're being involved with.
When you did something like Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century, well, there, when I got the storyboard, I would go over it with Maurice at the same time. And I tell him that do anything but don't interfere with the action. And he understood that.
I looked at the storyboard, then I started to cook up a lot of crazy ideas. And like the evaporator and a lot of that stuff.
The idea of going to the airport by dissolving, bloop, and he disappeared. And you cut to the airport, bloop, and he appears. I thought that was wonderful, you know. That didn't require anything from the animator, but it required a great deal from the layout man. When Daffy walks into the scene, he put that big eye up there, which put it in the future. Those are things that Maurice added. They were not part of the original story sketches.
And this is the essence of what animation design is all about.
Look at those backgrounds. They're fantastic. The backgrounds in the classic Roadrunner cartoons, great. You really want to be there.
That's Roadrunner country. This is all essence. The Grand Canyon, the Monument Valley, Painted Desert. These are all colors that have come from those areas. We were out in space, and I fooled around and trying to find some designs. I came up with this red runway and the glass and all this and that. Just a matter of flight of imagination, but it seemed to work. You design for the action. And incidentally, the star of the whole show is the animation. The background, the layout man, is a supporter.
Chuck has often said that the difference between a laugh and no laugh can be as little as one frame.
Okay, Pa. I will do good this time. Alley-oop.
The timing of Chuck Jones is remarkable. In this one Three Bears cartoon, they somehow catapult the father bear up into the air, and they look up in the sky, and he doesn't come down. And so they join hands and walk into the house. How long should they walk into the house? How long should it be nighttime before the sun comes up and you hear a rooster crow in the morning?
That sense of timing that Chuck brings to his animation is he keeps holding the audience back for as long as possible. Everybody knows what's going to happen, but he doesn't deliver it until like the last minute. I always think of it as like playing cards. You've got your ace there, and you know it's coming, and you just want to hang on to it as long as possible before you put it down for dramatic effect.
Speaking of that, you know where he threaded the rope off the house? What I liked very well for me was when he pushes the big boulder off of there. I wanted the audience to enjoy that half a second, or maybe a little 2 seconds. Them to know that he was pushing off and know what was going to happen to the cat. That's a delicious moment. I timed the action, pared it down where needed. At that point, and only at that point, what I call him Mel Blanc, we would go through it and I would be Bugs Bunny all the way through. And then we reverse it and he would be Daffy. So they'd be recording both of our voices.
It's true, Doc. I'm a rabbit, all right. Would you like to shoot me now or wait till you get home? Shoot him now! Shoot him now!
Shoot him now! Shoot him now! He doesn't have to shoot you now. I say he does have to shoot me now. And those quick changes that it really was pronoun trouble. And the director had to know the exact intonation of every line they had.
Let's run through that again. Okay.
This is a very calm thing here. Do you want to shoot him now or wait till you get home?
Would you like to shoot me now or wait till you get home? Shoot him now. Shoot him now. You keep out of this. He doesn't have to shoot you now. Ha! That's it. Hold it right there. Pronoun trouble.
To me, the reading of each sentence must be thought out very carefully.
Oh, no, you don't. Not this time. Wait till you get home. All right.
Mel was so good at it that the whole thing would probably take less than an hour because we all understood it as it went along. And he was so quick a reader. But he was the most ideal actor I'd ever worked with.
Chuck knew what he wanted. He was precise in his directions. And fortunately, he hired the right actors. I have a warm spot for Witch Hazel. Chuck was the one who really made it famous.
Darling! She was sort of an overweight Zsa Zsa Gabor.
She would look in the mirror and say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the ugliest one of all?" You know, and when she was reassured that she was the ugliest, she was so happy.
I'm so deathly afraid of getting pretty as I grow older. Pretty?
And she was a damn good actress, which is really the same thing with Mel.
The animator is an actor, but he acts on the direction of the director. He does what the director tells him. And he does as he draws, as the director wants him to draw.
Chuck had wonderful animators. He had Benny Washam, who was a great animator, and Lloyd Vaughn, and Ken Harris. Ken Harris was just great.
All of these guys were tremendous animators. Even so, Chuck's personality came through.
The animator would draw the first and maybe the 6th and the 8th drawing. And then the in-betweeners will go in between each drawing.
I warn you, dearie, I'm going to worm all of your ugly secrets out of you. Tell me now, who undoes your hair?
You don't get great animators. When you get them, you want to nurture them, hold them, and help them. Ken Harris had the ability to get action into things. Indeed, we want our characters to be alive. And that's the essence of everything to do with animation, isn't it? I mean, the term itself, to invoke life, I took very seriously. If they weren't alive, how the hell can I care about them? I discovered it isn't a question of drawing. It's a question of the expression that makes any character come to life.
Chuck's facial expressions were the best in the business because he was a minimalist.
We're so used to eyes as the one fixture on our body, really, that is always alive. When you have eyes moving, it brings life to the character. The rest of them can be dead. The move of the eye sometimes is one where something's happening and then you suddenly go, what? And that little eye flick, you'll catch it every time because you learn more from eyes moving than you do really from mouth moving even.
A lot of people think that classic cartoon animation is broad. Just everything you do is broad. And in actual fact, if you look at a Chuck Jones cartoon, it's not broad, it's rather subtle. The distinction is that if he wants a particular facial expression to read in a very sharp way, the transitions themselves will be very, very fast. I love Feed the Kitty because it's a great cartoon that's hysterically funny, but also very warm. You know, you actually feel something for this relationship that this big thug of a bulldog has for this teeny little cute kitten.
Now, what are you up to? You look very guilty.
The expressions on his face when he's trying to hide the kitten from his mistress are absolutely priceless, especially the one where he kind of does a little, who, me?
I did 53 drawings before I got it right.
The little kitty falls into a mixing bowl, and the dog thinks that he's been baked into a cookie.
Mark Anthony, you greedy thing.
He watches through the window as the housewife puts what he thinks is the cat in the oven to cook.
He's absolutely distraught when it looks like the kitten's been baked in a batch of cookies.
All right, Mark Anthony, I think you've been punished enough. My, what a long face. Well, I know just the thing for that. Here. Well, come on, take it.
I thought it was a laugh, but people in the audience cry a little. I never planned that.
I mean, I've seen people like choke while watching this cartoon, and yet it manages to be poignant and funny and very dark, all at the same time.
I will now play a passage from a famous opera, and you must name the opera. But I'm weary. Listen carefully. And there you have it now. What's the opera? Cavalleria Rusticana? Audience?
My story is probably not unique in that I came to classical music through the work of Chuck Jones.
The main reason for using that kind of music is the best music. And it's the most appropriate even for an animated cartoon.
Hi-ho, tinfoil! Away!
The William Tell Overture may be a cornball to us now, but it works. It works.
He was using these great works of classical music to express these ideas with so much humor.
The man who did most of the music for those cartoons was a man called Carl Stalling. Now, he is not a household word, but boy, was he good.
You'd never know that he had a wonderful sense of humor. He looked like a streetcar conductor, and I couldn't figure out where he got that, because he could do things with music that were very, very funny.
Leopold!
One of my favorite moments is when Bugs Bunny dons the wig as Leopold Stokowski and conducts the tenor through his aria. Speaking of poses and getting a lot out of a very little, the poses and gestures that Bugs goes through to control and manipulate the performance is brilliant.
Even the insane conducting gestures that he has him make are, of course they're funny, but they're not that far off, you know. That's what's so vicious and so wonderfully funny.
I had to learn piano score to this extent that I could see if the notes went up, it would get higher, if they came down, and I discovered how you broke up some of the stuff. What came to my attention was one time I noticed that a quarter note below the staff had that little line through it. It looked like a little man with a derby hat on. The whole thing came from that one thought.
The Blue Danube piece that Chuck created, where you have a set of notes that set up themselves and become the Blue Danube except for one note. You know, taking G clefs and molding them and doing all this stuff.
You notice we didn't put anything in there that didn't belong in there. That's the fun of it. If you're dealing in a hunk of music, notes, you have to be honest with yourself and with them. And the more you narrow it, the better it gets. Everything in there was honest, too. Every device that we used in there, you'd find honest half of music. Because if I'd known music, I probably would have leaned on things that I knew and how to employ it. Fortunately, I didn't know how to employ it, so the way I employed it gave it a kind of a novelty to the thing, I think, that might not have occurred otherwise. But in The Rabbit of Seville, the music happened to work, but it wasn't about the music, it was about Elmer's trying to kill the rabbit. The marriage of the music itself and the drawing then came together, both of us unexplored. The music didn't know it was going to be an animated cartoon, and I didn't know anything about music.
How do? Welcome to my shop. Let me cut your mop. Let me shave your crop. Daintily, daintily.
I don't know how many of us have grown up thinking that Rossini, came complete with lyrics that went, welcome to my shop, let me cut your mop, daintily, daintily.
I got to know that piece of music in that opera because of that cartoon. I don't know how many people my generation that probably happened to.
Rabbit of Seville is marvelous, mainly for me because of its precision. I think people don't realize that comedy has to be really, really precise in order to work. And when you are conceiving and timing something to music so well, that's the difference between making people laugh and making people enjoy it and not.
It's much funnier to me to see people doing funny things in front of great music than it is to have a caricature of music. The music was written this way, and you're trying to do something with it. You can't change the timing of it. What interested you in it was the way it was written, and the hesitates and everything are in there. Once you start, and once you've sacrificed yourself on that particular cross, you have to accept the idea that that's what you're working with. The music is there. Now you bring in another factor, drawing. Simple drawing.
And the scene where Bugs has a hair tonic and puts on Elmer's head and the flowers grow out, and it's done to the music so impeccably. In the chase. And then it leads up to, of course, the battle of the bigger and bigger weapons. It's just the escalation, done to the music. It just makes that so hilarious and so funny.
Of course, it turned generations of people off opera. Probably no more so than the Marx Brothers did. I think it was a very easy straight line because opera has great beauty, and although it was mostly Wagner, it was mostly the German operas they go after.
Opera singers don't have a posse. You never see like Wagner's guys going after well, yo, Wagner rules. Keep it out there. Represent Wagner right now. Ring cycle. Nibelungen. Keeping it real. I want to thank Wagner for putting it out.
Well, Mark Twain said Wagner's music was better than it sounded, and he said he liked Parsifal except for the singing. I've never met anybody who could sit through the entire Ring of the Nibelungen and come out sane, or even alive for that matter.
I mean, come on, the white horse coming down and sitting down, all that fat bulges out. I mean, that is just hugely funny, but it's like everything looks so beautiful.
You're so far away.
Yes, I know it. I can't help it.
Up one hill, be my love.
The thing I love about Chuck Jones's work is how he incorporated exquisite design into these cartoons, into the storytelling, into the timing, into the humor. You know, I mean, that's, I think, one of the amazing things about what's opera doc.
The other directors tended to play it safe. They had one product and they go with it. They do it over and over and over again. But now Chuck, he was always straining to do something new and different. In other words, he gave me tremendous leeway. We had a previous designer that wanted to have the proscenium art right on stage all the time. I said, oh, the hell with that, you know. I wanted to have super grand opera. We threw away the arch completely and immediately started writing on a grand scale. The long shot, the big shadow and all that, Chuck worked it back into the picture.
Be very quiet. I'm hunting rabbits.
And it was kind of back and forth all the way through that. Sometimes he'd suggest bits of action, and sometimes I could suggest a setup for something, you see. I pre-designed color sketches, you know, take them in and say, Chuck, maybe the picture can go this way.
What have I done?
He said, what are you bothering me for?
I've killed
I'm
the
busy
rabbit.
doing my animation layouts. You go do the backgrounds.
I believe that on the average Warner Brothers cartoon, there's probably 60-something shots in the cartoon. That one was 110 or something like that. I don't know the exact numbers, but it was so much bigger than anything that had been done before. Yet he made it work so well. And the design in that is so exquisite. It really took the Warner Brothers cartoon up to a whole nother level.
Animation, I suppose, as an art form, is very much like ballet. Chuck's work particularly made use of that, choreographing each movement and each expression to a pre-recorded soundtrack, gave it all just a sort of a perfect symmetry.
The music was right, but it's what they did in front of it that made it funny, we hoped. What made the thing was Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny addressing Wagner head on. So we took the 14 hours of the Nibelung and squashed it down to 6 minutes.
I'll kill the rabbit. Away, storm!
Maurice said he probably told you the problems he had with the colors. They didn't like the idea of Elmer being lavender and purple and different colors because he'd never been done that way. Fortunately, all of our battles were never gigantic. They were always minuscule, but they were absolutely defined by the need for the picture.
What have I done? I've killed the rabbit.
When Elmer says, I've killed a rabbit, the audience goes quiet. They're right with you. Poor little rabbit, I killed a rabbit. From all this exciting color, and this somberness.
Well, what did you expect in an opera? A happy ending?
When the glory days of Bugs Bunny were over for him, it didn't stop him. I mean, he took a lot of chances and he did a lot of experimenting. Some of it worked, like The Grinch and The Dot in the Line, which is a wonderful cartoon, when he went to MGM. And other things didn't work. For instance, he took over Tom and Jerry.
Chuck tried to give them a slightly different look, a slightly different take. I think that people wanted to see Tom and Jerry exactly as they'd seen it. They didn't want any kind of changes, and so to the extent Chuck made changes, it may have bothered people.
If you looked at all of Chuck Jones's cartoons in chronological order, he really was like almost predicting design styles.
It's interesting when you talk about a film like High Note or Dot in the Line, because those, I think, really represent departures for Chuck, although he was trying to do that, I think, through his career, you know, trying to find those unique stories to tell.
The little book, if you've ever seen it, is very clever. And so we took that book and expanded it. To translate from a book form, boy, you have to do a lot of thinking and a lot of planning and maneuvering around to make it work. was very successful. You know, it got the Academy Award.
Once upon a time, there was a sensible straight line who was hopelessly in love with a dot.
I don't want something that's realistic. I want something that's believable. And the dot and the line, for instance, you can make a believable character out of something that's just a straight line.
The frivolous dot wasn't a bit interested, for she only had eyes for a wild and unkempt squiggle who never seemed to have anything on his mind at all.
He wanted to go for something that was different. It was so different than anything he'd done at Warner Brothers. It was avant-garde for its day, for God's sake.
He saw the potential in a totally abstract film to do something like that, and he managed, and this was his genius, to make a dot, a line, and a squiggle absolutely human, so you cared about them.
His worried friends noticed how terribly thin and drawn he was and did their best to cheer him up. She's not good enough for you. She lacks depth. They all look alike anyway. Why don't you find a nice straight line and settle down? But he hardly heard a word they said. For anyway he looked at her, she was perfect.
It's such a wonderful cartoon for its minimalism, and it's so exquisite in its simplicity of design.
When he had all but given up, he discovered at last that with great concentration and self-control, he was able to change direction and bend wherever he chose. So he did, and made an angle. And then again, and made another, and then 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 another.
It's character animation at its purest form. Because you have a straight line, you have a dot, and the straight line is stiff and boring. And then Squiggle comes in, and he's just so cool and all like that, and the dot kind of gets excited about it. But it's not until, you know, the line realizes all the amazing things that it can do. You know, and it becomes a whole nother character. It comes out of his shell.
Now he was dazzling. Clever. Mysterious.
Translating a book into a screenplay is something that very few authors even understand.
I knew the book, I had read it to my children, and the Grinch was not a surprise to me because I loved the material, but it was a surprise to me that Chuck could do it so well. It didn't look, it was like it was that adaptable to the screen.
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
The Grinch That Stole Christmas, to me, has always been a high watermark of a character that you love to hate.
Staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown.
When he looks down in Whoville and you see this smile come on his face, and it's all in anticipation of what he's going to do, and you can just crawl into his head, and it's an intellectual anticipation. It's not just in the animation, too. You really savor those moments.
The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea.
Chuck is the master of a freeze frame, or a still, where everything stops, and you can just hear the wheels turning inside the character's head.
And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas Sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I put up with it now. I must stop Christmas from coming. But how?
Well, Chuck was great on choosing voices. Look at Karloff in The Grinch. I mean, that was an extraordinary choice that no one had thought of, and really was a unique concept of Chuck's.
And Max has got to be one of the great canine characters in history.
There had to be somebody in there that could observe what was happening and reflect the absurdity of the whole matter. Dr. Seuss, that is Ted Geisel, said that he said the Grinch looked a lot more like me than it did like his Grinch. In a way, it was true, too.
He puzzled and puzzled till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe
Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more.
We've relegated TV animation to the second-class cousin of the big, expensive features. It doesn't have to be that way. It's all about what is in the creator's mind.
I'd say that the great frustration and, in a way, the challenge for us in trying to make a live-action version is that we can't compete, so we just sort of choose not to.
You usually get less money as something gets older, and MGM got more money as this thing got older. So then you know you have a classic.
I think the popularity of The Grinch is a testament enough to the fact that, you know, even in his later years, he was still doing material that people were going to be looking at, you know, long after he was gone.
It is my great pleasure to present this very special achievement award to an artist who is a true visionary. Ladies and gentlemen, put him together for the hardest drawing man in show business, Chuck Jones.
What can I say in the face of such humiliating evidence? I stand guilty before the world of directing over 300 cartoons in the last 50 or 60 years. Hopefully, this means you've forgiven me.
The greatest thing for me was backstage at the Academy Awards after he got his Lifetime Achievement. He was backstage talking to all these journalists, and he was talking about animation and comparing it to classic Greek drama. And he said, you know, the tragic hero. And then but with the coyote, he is basically the tragic hero, you know, raging against the gods, but somehow still finding an anvil.
I was privileged to be with Chuck that night. It was his fourth Oscar. He's received 3 others for individual cartoons. This was his fourth, and was really for a career. And I can think of little more deserving than that Oscar.
That Oscar was sort of, I think, a great way of everybody saying, you know, thanks for giving me more imagination than I ever would have had if it weren't for you.
An important role that Chuck is playing today is as an elder statesman for animation.
So many of the animation cells had been destroyed, and so Chuck said, oh, that's okay, I can redraw them.
Pleasure to see you.
He felt that he could recreate the moments that were perhaps most important to him or most important to others, and that we could have those moments back.
Linda started it, really, all the way.
He has said many, many times how separated from his audience he always was when he was making the films, and that there was never an opportunity for him to interact personally with them. Now he has an opportunity to shake their hand and hear their comments and actually be a part of their lives, and it just means the world to him to be able to do that. Chuck retired for about 2.5 minutes in 1980. Of course, he continued to speak and teach and write. He realized that it would be fun to do the drawing of the limited editions. We've always enjoyed working together, so it was a fortuitous opportunity for both of us to follow our hearts, I guess.
He has given us his versions of some of the most famous cartoon characters in history, but his versions are the definitive ones.
My favorite Chuck Jones cartoons are everybody's favorite Chuck Jones cartoons. One Froggy Evening is as perfect a film as I ever hope to see.
I think there's no cartoon that holds a candle to that, ever. Nothing's ever come close. That's the Citizen Kane of the animated short.
hello, my honey, hello, my ragtime gal. Send me a kiss by wire. Baby, my heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you lose me, then you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone and tell me I'm your own.
Of course, that whole picture, the devil of the thing, is the most difficult picture I ever directed.
Hello, my honey. Hello, my baby. Hello, my baby. You know, it's the Jolson frog.
Michigan J. Frog could only dance, could only sing when the man who owned him could sing, but he could not in front of anybody else. But I love that kind of a challenge. I always wondered what would happen if you got a child prodigy that wouldn't prodige. That's exactly what he is. And so the frog naturally says, "Blow up."
Everybody do the Michigan ride. Everybody likes the Michigan ride. Every mame and chain and root. Stomp, romp, pump the Michigan. Jump, clump, pump the Michigan ride. That loving ride.
You know what's going on, greed. You know that this is show business at its essence. I found a talent. And it's a manager going, oh, come on, my little buddy. Sure, we'll pay you.
Everybody wants to be rich, I'll say that. I mean, I will assert that, except me. All I ever wanted to do was to have enough money to live comfortably and to do what I enjoy doing. And it turned out that's what my life was pretty much about.
I think one of the reasons why Chuck Jones cartoons are timeless is because the jokes are classic, they still work, and the sheer laughter at human absurdity is always there.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal.
He just created a generation of imagination in young people all across the world.
He's remained relevant and contemporary and funny. All these years, he still connects.
For me, Chuck Jones is a given in our culture. He's just part of the atmosphere. He's part of the environment. You wake up in the morning and you know Bugs Bunny is out there doing something.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue with this picture. And, confidentially, that film didn't exactly break.
Return, my love, a longing burns deep inside me.
Return, my love, I want you always beside me.
Love like ours must be
made for you and for me. Return, won't you return, my love, for my love is yours.
Saturday night at 9, join Paul Gross's eccentric director and his dysfunctional cast for Missed Cues and Missiles, in the last in the current series of the acclaimed comedy Slings and Arrows. Next tonight, though, the USSR Ministry of Culture Chamber Choir perform Rachmaninoff's Vespers at the Royal Albert Hall.